Good evening friends, you are most welcome to Think Eyes channel. Today we are going to discuss Practicing Anthropology by MAAN IGNOU, and our topic is Advanced Areas in Practicing Anthropology, in which we are going to discuss short tandem repeats STR or microsatellite. Let us begin the topic. Short tandem repeats are composed shorter and simpler repeat sequences 2 to 6 nucleotides in contrast to the RFLPs. These STRs are highly variable and each of the STRs is determined by a separate locus. These repeats can be amplified faithfully with the polymerase chain reaction PCR, enabling precise allele designations in population surveys on the basis of their DNA sequence. STRs were first used in forensic casework for the identification of human remains in Persian Gulf War in 1991. Single nucleotide polymorphism single nucleotide polymorphism SNPs, are sites in the individual genome that have at least two different nucleotide bases at the same location. This point mutations or substitution of a single nucleotide do not change the overall length of the DNA sequence in the region. Presently, the SNPs are used as tools for studying variation within human populations or between different populations. Over the past years, a large number of different SNP technologies have been developed based on various methods of allelic discrimination and detection platforms. What are the applications of DNA polymorphism in anthropology? It is impossible to exhaustively list all possible applications. The more important ones are inferring population histories and affinities, reconstructing mutational patterns and dating occurrences of mutations in populations, relating inferences in demographic histories of populations, mapping disease genes, and tracing trials of disease and other genes. The best way to study population and affinity is by comparing DNA sequence of individuals from different populations, since not only is DNA analysis more informative than analysis of proteins, but it is also direct and unambiguous. Genetic distance analysis based on DNA polymorphisms indicated a major division of human populations into an African and a Eurasian group. This is consistent with the postulate and earliest forms of modern human originated in Africa and subsequently gave rise to all non-African populations. Forensic and legal traits, individual identification, and crime detection. Forensic anthropology is the application of the science of physical anthropology to the legal process. Forensic anthropology is an applied science. It borrows methods and techniques developed from skeletal biology and osteology and apply them to cases of forensic importance. In this lesson, we discuss forensic anthropology as an applied science in brief, as it has been taken up in detail in the first unit of this block. Anthropometry deals with the qualitative assessment of human physiques. When we take these methods and apply them to unknown modern human remains with the aim of establishing identity or manner of death, then we are practicing the forensic application of osteology. Forensic anthropology involves the application of these same methods to modern cases of unidentified human remains. Through the established methods, a forensic anthropologist can aid law enforcement in establishing a profile on the unidentified remains. The profile includes sex, age, ethnicity, height, length of time since death, and sometimes the evaluation of trauma seen on bones. Individual identification and crime detection. The anthropologist can assess metric and non-metric characteristics of the bones to determine the minimum number of individuals, sex, stature, age at death, time time since death, ancestry and race, health, and unique identifying characteristics such as healed breaks or surgical scars. Sometimes the forensic anthropologist must determine whether the remains found are actually human Occasionally, positive identification can be established from such remains, but often only an exclusionary identity can be drawn. However, the primary responsibility of a forensic anthropologist is to provide law enforcement with a biological profile of the deceased, age, sex, ancestry, stature, and individualizing characteristics to help narrow down the possible identity of the descendant. Forensic anthropologists apply standard scientific techniques developed in physical anthropology to identify human remains and to assist in the detection of crime, in addition to assisting in locating and recovering suspicious remains. Forensic anthropologists work to suggest the age, sex, ancestry, stature, and unique features of a descendant from the skeleton. Identification of sex. In general, the human skeleton provides ample evidences of its sex and age. The bones of the female, for example, are less robust than those of the male, and the ridges, which provide attachments for muscles and tendons, are less prominent in the female. The pelvis, thigh bones, and skull are particularly noted for their sexual characteristics. The female pelvis, constructed to meet the needs of childbearing, has several features, notably wider hips, which distinguish it from the male. Apart from general appearance, a number of measurements can be conducted on pelvic bones, which can help in establishing sex. The difference in ratio between the length of the pubis and ischium, known as the ischium pubis index, is commonly used for this purpose. The skulls also have a number of important features which help to determine the age and sex of a skeleton. Identification of age. Age is determined by studying a number of skeletal features in humans, principally the skull, teeth, and centers of ossification. As the young human body develops from soon after conception until early adulthood, the growth of the bones is regulated by center of ossification, which gradually fill out and fuse together to give the bone shape and size. This process is established in a regular pattern which enables the skilled anatomist to give a reliable estimate of age to within 1 or 2 years. Examination of the growing ends of the bones epiphyses is especially relevant. The teeth also became important later in the identification of the specific individual, particularly the age. Reconstruction of height. Using the regression formula for estimating living stature with standard errors obtained from the average of the long bone length of both right and left humeri, ulnae and radi, femurs, tibia and fibulae. An estimate of the descendant height could be assessed. Identification of descendants. Racial affiliation. In the present day, it is very difficult to comment on the racial affiliations on examining the skeletal remains. One could comment on the basis of the cranial index or nasal index, as Caucasoids generally have mesocephalic heads and Negroids possesses dolichocephalic heads, while the Mongoloids have brachycephalic heads. Similarly, the Negroids have very broad nose, while the Caucasoids have long nose and the Mongoloids have very small nose. Forensic anthropologists frequently work in conjunction with forensic pathologists, odontologists, and homicide investigators to identify a descendant, discover evidence of trauma, and determine the post-mortem interval. Though they typically lack the legal authority to declare the official cause of death, their opinions may be taken into consideration by the medical examiner In fact, a forensic anthropologist is now an integral member of most mass disaster teams.